The text hit me like a sniper's bullet while I was waiting for my duffel bag at Logan Airport Carousel number 3. 3 months of Afghan dust in my lungs, 3 months of training green recruits how to stay alive in hostile territory, and my wife Iris sends me 8 words that might as well have been my ruin. Don't come home tonight. I need some space. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Space. Christ, I'd been staring at nothing but space for 92 days straight. Empty desert, empty sky, empty bunks where good soldiers used to sleep before they rotated home or got shipped out in boxes. The last thing I needed was more goddamn space. My name's Cole Harrington, and I'm a Recon instructor for the Army Reserve. 38 years old, built like a brick shithouse, and apparently married to a woman who thinks space is something you ask for via text message while your husband's been dodging Taliban potshots for Uncle Sam. I stared at that message until the carousel stopped moving and some kid in a Logan Airport uniform asked if I needed help. Help? Sure, kid. Got a time machine? Instead, I grabbed my bag and walked to the parking garage, my boots echoing off concrete like gunshots. That's when the second message came through, this one from my buddy Sam Martinez, who'd been keeping an eye on things while I was gone. Brother, you need to see this. Attached was a photo that made me freeze. There was my beautiful wife Iris, all 5'6" of her, with her auburn hair and those green eyes that used to look at me like I hung the moon. Only now she was looking at Detective Kellan Brooks the same way, and his tongue was halfway down her throat. They were at the last call, the dive bar on Meridian Street that Iris always said she hated because it smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams. Guess she'd gotten over her aversion to cheap beer and cheaper men. I sat in my truck for maybe 10 minutes, watching airport traffic and letting the reality sink in. 3 months. I'd been gone exactly 3 months, and she'd managed to find herself a new hobby, a married hobby, judging by the wedding ring clearly visible on Detective Brooks's left hand as he groped my wife's ass like he was checking for concealed weapons. The funny thing about betrayal is how quiet it is when it finally hits you. You expect explosions, rage, maybe some property damage. Instead, I felt nothing but a cold, calculating calm settling over me like a familiar uniform. It was the same feeling I got when I spotted enemy movement through my scope and had to decide whether to take the shot or call it in. This time, I was definitely taking the shot. I drove home to our little house in Medford, the fixer-upper we'd bought 2 years ago with dreams of kids and backyard barbecues. The key still worked, which was something. Iris hadn't changed the locks yet, probably because she figured she had more time before I came home. The house felt different immediately, colder. Her perfume was gone from the air, replaced by something else, something masculine and cheap. Probably whatever cologne Detective Brooks splashed on before he came over to console my lonely wife. I found her phone on the kitchen counter, plugged into the charger. She'd gotten sloppy, or maybe she wanted me to find it. Either way, it took me about 30 seconds to crack her password. Same as always, our anniversary date. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. What I found in her messages made that photo look like a church picnic. Hundreds of texts between Iris and Kay going back 4 months. 4 months. I'd only been deployed for 3, which meant this started while I was still stateside, probably while I was packing my gear and telling her how much I'd miss her. The messages were detailed, graphic, and absolutely damning. Iris describing what she wanted Brooks to do to her. Brooks telling her about his wife and kids, how boring they were compared to her. Plans for meetups while I was overseas. Photos I definitely didn't want to see but couldn't stop looking at. But it was the timestamps that really got me. Messages sent at 2 a.m. on nights when I'd called home and she'd said she was just going to bed early. Messages sent during my birthday while I was celebrating with MREs and mortar fire in the distance. Messages sent the day after she'd written me a letter about how much she missed me and couldn't wait for me to come home. I opened her laptop next, and that's when I found the folder labeled "For K Videos, Photos," a detailed fantasy she'd written about leaving me for him. And at the bottom, a document titled "Exit Strategy" that outlined how she planned to divorce me, take half of everything, and move in with Brooks after he left his wife. That's when the calm cracked, just a little. My hands started shaking, not from fear, but from the effort it took not to put my fist through the laptop screen. Instead, I closed it gently and walked to the kitchen to make myself a cup of coffee. Then I called Major Stanton, my old commanding officer, who'd retired to become a military legal consultant. If anyone would know how to handle this situation with precision and maximum damage, it was him. "Cole? Thought you weren't due back until tomorrow." "Change of plans, sir. I need to discuss a civilian operation." There was a pause. Stanton had been in the service for 30 years before he retired. He knew the tone in my voice, knew what it meant when a soldier went cold and professional about personal business. "What's the target?" "My wife and her boyfriend. I need them neutralized but clean. No collateral damage to my position." "Roger that. What's your timeline?" I looked around the house that used to be my home, at the photos on the walls showing a marriage that had apparently been over for months, while I was risking my life for my country. "Immediate action, sir. They want space? I'm going to give them all the space they can handle." The first rule of any successful operation is intelligence gathering. You don't go in blind, and you don't act on emotion. You watch, you learn, you document everything, and then you strike with overwhelming force when your enemy least expects it. I spent the next morning setting up surveillance on my own life, which was about as surreal as it sounds. I installed cameras in the house, the kind you can buy at any electronic store for home security. Perfectly legal since it was my house too. Then I did a complete audit of our finances, and what I found made me want to laugh and throw up at the same time. Iris had been using our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms, our money. She'd been charging romantic dinners and lingerie purchases to our account while I was eating military rations and getting shot at. The paper trail was beautiful in its stupidity. Every transaction was documented, time-stamped, and utterly damning. But I needed more than financial records. I needed to see them in action. That evening, I drove to the last call and parked across the street where I could watch the entrance. I'd changed into civilian clothes, jeans, work boots, baseball cap pulled low. Just another blue-collar guy grabbing a beer after a long day. I had my old Recon camera with me, military surplus that could record in low light without a flash. At 8:30, Brooks's black Charger pulled up. Flashy car for a cop's salary, but then again, maybe his wife didn't know about all his extracurricular expenses either. He walked into the bar like he owned the place, chest puffed out, badge probably burning a hole in his wallet with how badly he wanted to flash it. Detective Kellan Brooks was everything I'd expected from Iris's descriptions. 6 feet tall, decent build, the kind of guy who'd been good-looking in high school and never got over it. Wedding ring catching the streetlight as he pushed through the door. 20 minutes later, Iris arrived in her Honda Civic. She'd dressed up for him, wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our last anniversary, the one she'd said was too fancy for anywhere we could afford to go. I followed her inside, keeping to the shadows near the pool tables. The last call was exactly the kind of place Iris used to complain about. Dim lighting, sticky floors, the smell of cigarettes that had soaked into the wood paneling despite the smoking ban. But there she was, sliding into a booth across from Brooks, like she'd been coming here her whole life. I ordered a beer from the bartender, a grizzled guy who looked like he'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by any of it. From my position at the bar, I had a perfect view of their table and could hear most of their conversation over the jukebox, playing classic rock. "I missed you," Iris said, reaching across the table to touch Brooks's hand. "Yeah? How much?" He was grinning like a teenager who'd just gotten to second base. "Enough to do something about it. Cole's back, but he's staying at a hotel tonight. We have the house to ourselves." My hand tightened on the beer bottle, but I kept my expression neutral. The bartender glanced my way, and I nodded for another drink like I didn't have a care in the world. "What about after?" Brooks asked. "We can't keep sneaking around forever. My wife's already asking questions about all the overtime I've been pulling." "That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Iris leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I've been thinking about what you said, about us being together for real. And I want to leave him. I've already talked to a lawyer about divorce proceedings. With his military pension and the house, I'd get enough to start over. We could start over." Brooks looked around the bar nervously. "Keep your voice down. If this gets back to the department, it won't. And even if it did, what are they going to do? Fire you for falling in love?" Love. She called it love. I'd been deployed for 3 months, and she'd fallen in love with a married cop who was cheating on his wife and kids. The same woman who used to lecture me about honor and commitment was talking about love while planning to destroy 2 marriages simultaneously. I recorded everything, the camera hidden in my jacket pocket. Their conversation, their body language, the way Brooks kept looking around like he was worried someone might recognize him. Which was smart, because half the guys in this bar probably knew he was married. They left together at 10:15, Brooks's hand on the small of Iris's back as they walked to their cars. I waited 5 minutes, then followed at a distance, staying back far enough to avoid detection, but close enough to see where they went. They went to my house. My house. I parked 3 blocks away and walked back, staying in the shadows between streetlights. The house was lit up like Christmas morning. They hadn't even bothered to close the curtains. Through the living room window, I could see them on my couch, Brooks's hands all over my wife while she unbuttoned his shirt. I took more pictures, more video, documenting everything with the cold precision of a professional. This wasn't personal anymore. This was evidence collection for the operation to come. At midnight, Brooks left, and I watched him drive away in his flashy car with my wife's lipstick probably still on his collar. Iris stood in the doorway waving goodbye, wearing nothing but my old army t-shirt. That was the moment I stopped thinking of her as my wife and started thinking of her as a target. I drove back to the cheap motel where I'd been staying and called Major Stanton. "How'd the recon go?" "Target confirmed. I have documentation, financial records, and video evidence. They're planning to accelerate their timeline." "What's your next move?" I stared at the motel ceiling, listening to traffic on the highway and planning the destruction of 2 lives with the same methodical approach I'd used to plan a military operation. Phase 2. I'm going to start applying pressure and see how they react. My guess is they'll panic and make mistakes. Be careful, Cole. Civilians don't follow rules of engagement. Neither do I, sir. Not anymore. The next morning, I started the psychological warfare phase of the operation. The beauty of fighting civilians is that they're not trained to handle sustained pressure. They crack, they make mistakes, and they usually end up destroying themselves if you just give them enough rope. First target, Detective Brooks. I waited until he left for work, then followed him to the police station. His precious Charger was parked in the lot like a beacon, all black paint and chrome wheels that probably cost more than most cops made in overtime. I parked across the street and watched the building for 2 hours, timing shift changes and noting security procedures. At lunch, Brooks came out alone and drove to a sandwich shop downtown. While he was inside ordering his turkey club or whatever cops eat when they're not screwing other men's wives, I took a walk through the parking lot. The key to psychological warfare is making your enemy know they're being hunted without giving them anything concrete to fight back against. You want them paranoid, looking over their shoulders, making bad decisions because they're scared. I didn't key his car. That would have been petty, criminal, and easily traced. Instead, I did something much more subtle and infinitely more terrifying. I left a note under his windshield wiper, plain white paper, block letters written with a generic ballpoint pen, space denied. That was it. 2 words that would mean nothing to anyone else but would hit Brooks like a sledgehammer once he talked to Iris and realized her husband was back in town and knew about their little romance. Then I drove to Iris's office. She worked as a paralegal for a small law firm downtown, the kind of place that handled divorces and personal injury cases for middle-class clients who couldn't afford the big corporate firms. I'd been there a few times for office parties and firm picnics. Nice people mostly. Conservative, professional, the type who valued discretion and family values. I walked into the reception area like I belonged there, nodding to the receptionist who recognized me as Iris's husband. "Cole, you're back. Iris didn't mention you were coming in today." "Surprise visit," I said with my best smile. "Is she available?" "She's in a meeting with Mr. Patterson, but I can let her know you're here." "Actually, I just wanted to drop something off for her. Anniversary surprise." I held up a manila envelope. "Could you make sure she gets this?" The receptionist, a sweet older woman named Dorothy, practically melted. "Of course. How romantic. She's so lucky to have you." If she only knew. The envelope contained printouts of Iris's credit card statements with the hotel charges highlighted in yellow, along with a simple note, "We need to talk, tonight. Cole." I was walking back to my truck when my phone rang. Iris, right on schedule. "Cole? Dorothy said you stopped by. What's going on?" "Just wanted to let you know I'm back in town. Thought we could have dinner tonight and catch up." There was a long pause. I'm not sure that's a good idea right now. I meant what I said about needing space." "I know you did. But we're married, Iris. We need to talk about some things. Financial things." Another pause. Longer this time. "What kind of financial things?" "The kind that are better discussed in person. How about 7 o'clock? I'll pick up Chinese from that place you like." "Cole, I really think 7 o'clock, Iris. Be there." I hung up before she could argue. Let her spend the afternoon wondering what I knew and how much trouble she was in. Fear is a powerful motivator, and right now I wanted her afraid. My phone rang again, almost immediately. Not Iris this time. Sam Martinez, my old Recon buddy who'd been keeping an eye on things while I was deployed. "Brother, you need to get over here. We need to talk." Sam lived in a converted garage behind his sister's house in Somerville, surrounded by the kind of electronic equipment that would make the NSA jealous. He'd done 2 tours in Iraq as a communications specialist before getting out and starting his own security consulting business. If you needed surveillance equipment, background checks, or just someone to watch your six, Sam was your guy. "What's the situation?" I asked when I walked into his electronic cave. "The situation is that you're about to do something stupid, and I'm going to help you do it smart." He gestured to a bank of monitors showing various social media feeds, public records, and what looked like financial data. "I've been digging into your boy Brooks since you called last night." "And?" "And he's dirtier than a Taliban safe house. 3 complaints filed against him in the last 2 years for harassment, all mysteriously dropped. Rumors about other affairs, though nothing proven. And get this, he's been moonlighting as security for a construction company owned by his brother-in-law. Cash payments, no records, probably not reporting it on his taxes." Sam pulled up a series of photographs on one of his monitors. Brooks in uniform, Brooks at various locations around the city, Brooks with different women who definitely weren't his wife. "Your wife's got terrible taste in men, brother. Present company excluded." "What about his family situation?" "Wife's name is Jennifer, works as a teacher at an elementary school. 2 kids, ages 8 and 10. Clean as a whistle, probably has no idea her husband's been playing hide the salami with half of Boston." I studied the photos, memorizing faces and details. "Can you get me his work schedule?" "Already done." Sam handed me a printed sheet. Patrol shifts, court dates, training days, everything you need to know about where he'll be and when. "What about Iris?" Sam's expression darkened. "That's where it gets interesting. Your loving wife has been busy while you were gone. Not just with Brooks, either." He pulled up another set of files, these showing Iris's activities over the past 3 months. Credit card records, cell phone location data, social media posts she thought she'd deleted. She's been talking to a divorce lawyer since 2 weeks after you deployed, filed preliminary paperwork, had the house appraised, even opened a separate bank account. This wasn't some spontaneous affair, Cole. This was planned. The cold rage I'd been keeping under control flared up again, but I pushed it down. Emotion was the enemy of good planning. How much does she know about my finances? Everything she had access to, which is most of your joint accounts. But here's the thing. She doesn't know about your military savings account or the insurance policies, and she definitely doesn't know about the trust fund your grandmother left you. That was true. I'd kept some assets separate, partly out of habit, and partly because I'd learned early in life that you always keep something in reserve for emergencies. This definitely qualified as an emergency. What's your recommendation? Sam leaned back in his chair, grinning like a wolf. Full-spectrum warfare, brother. Legal, financial, social, and psychological. We destroy them both, but we do it clean and we do it smart. No criminal charges, no jail time for you, just complete and total destruction of their lives. I'm listening. First, we document everything. Every meeting, every phone call, every financial transaction. Build a case that would make the FBI jealous. Then we start applying pressure at multiple points simultaneously. His job, her job, their families, their friends. We make them so paranoid and desperate that they start making mistakes. And the endgame? Sam's grin got wider. We give them exactly what they wanted. Space. Lots and lots of space. From each other, from their careers, from their comfortable little lives. By the time we're done, they'll wish they'd never heard of each other. I looked at the monitors, at the evidence of my wife's betrayal and her boyfriend's corruption, and felt that cold calm settling over me again. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. When do we start? Brother, we already started. Brooks found your note about 20 minutes ago. Security cameras at the sandwich shop caught him reading it, and let me tell you, he did not look happy. On one of the monitors, Sam pulled up a grainy but clear image of Detective Brooks standing next to his car, holding a piece of white paper and looking around the parking lot like he expected snipers on every rooftop. Phase 1 complete. Target acquired and engaged. Ready for Phase 2? I was more than ready. I was hungry for it. By 6:30 that evening, I was sitting in my truck outside our house, watching Iris pace back and forth in front of the living room window like a caged animal. She'd been on the phone for the past 20 minutes, probably talking to Brooks about the note I'd left on his car and trying to figure out how much I knew. She was about to find out. I walked up to the front door and used my key, announcing myself like I was coming home from any normal day at work. Honey, I'm home. Iris appeared in the hallway, still holding her phone. She'd changed clothes since work, trading her professional attire for jeans and a sweater. Casual, but not too casual. The kind of outfit you wear when you're trying to look innocent but still attractive. Cole, you're early. Traffic was lighter than expected. I held up bags of Chinese takeout. Hope you're hungry. She followed me into the kitchen, keeping her distance like I might explode at any moment, which was smart of her, because I just might. We need to talk, she said, as I unpacked containers of lo mein and General Tichot's chicken. I know we do. That's why I brought dinner. Figured we might as well be civilized about it. I set the table like nothing was wrong, like I hadn't spent the last 24 hours discovering that my marriage was a lie and my wife was a cheating whore. Plates, napkins, chopsticks, just a normal couple having a normal dinner conversation. Cole, I know you're upset about the text message, but... Upset? I looked up from the containers, giving her my best confused expression. Why would I be upset? You said you needed space. I'm giving you space. You are? Absolutely. In fact, I've been thinking about what you said, and you're right. We probably do need some time apart to figure things out. The relief on her face was almost comical. She'd been expecting a fight, maybe some yelling, definitely some drama. Instead, I was being reasonable and understanding. It was probably the last thing she'd expected. Really? Really? I mean, 3 months is a long time to be apart. People change. Relationships change. It's only natural that you might have explored other options while I was gone. Now she looked nervous again. What do you mean, other options? I sat down at the table and started serving food like we were discussing the weather. Come on, Iris. We're both adults here. You think I don't know about Detective Brooks? The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Cole, I can explain. No need to explain. Like I said, people change. Relationships change. The important thing is that we handle this like mature adults. She sat down across from me, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her chopsticks. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you want a divorce, we can discuss it. Amicably. No lawyers, no fighting, no drama. Just two people who grew apart, deciding to go their separate ways. You do that? Of course. I love you, Iris. If you're not happy, then I want you to be happy, even if it's with someone else. I could see the wheels turning in her head. This was too easy, too good to be true, but she wanted to believe it so badly that she was willing to ignore her instincts. What about the house? And our savings? We'll split everything 50-50, fair and square. I took a bite of chicken, chewing thoughtfully. There is just one small problem. What problem? I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila folder, setting it on the table between us. The credit card statements. Iris stared at the folder like it might bite her. See, I was going through our finances today, trying to figure out how to divide everything up, and I noticed some interesting charges. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, lingerie purchases, all while I was overseas. Cole, now I'm not upset about the affair. Like I said, these things happen, but using our joint credit card to pay for your dates with Detective Brooks, that's going to be a problem in divorce court. I opened the folder and spread out the statements, each one marked with highlighter to show the relevant charges. Hotel rooms at the Marriott downtown, dinners at expensive restaurants I'd never been to, Victoria's secret purchases on dates when she'd told me she was staying home to do laundry. You see, adultery is still grounds for divorce in Massachusetts, and when you add in the financial evidence showing that you used marital assets to conduct the affair, well, let's just say the 50-50 split might not be as automatic as you'd hoped. Iris was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. When did you? I'm very thorough, sweetheart. It's what they train us to do in the Army. Attention to detail, documentation, evidence collection. You'd be amazed what you can learn about someone's activities just by looking at their financial records. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. Oh, that's interesting. Looks like Detective Brooks just got called in to meet with Internal Affairs tomorrow morning. Something about conduct unbecoming an officer. The last bit of color left Iris's face. You didn't. Didn't what? Report a police officer for having an affair with a married woman while he's also married? Using his position to get free drinks at bars? Possibly violating department policy about relationships with civilians involved in ongoing investigations? What investigations? I'm not involved in any investigations. Well, you are now. See, adultery might not be a crime anymore, but fraud is. And using joint credit cards without your spouse's knowledge to conduct an extramarital affair could be considered a form of fraud, especially when it involves thousands of dollars over several months. I stood up, leaving my dinner half finished. But like I said, I want this to be amicable. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Detective Brooks and tell him that your husband is back and you need to cool things down for a while. You're going to stop using our joint accounts for anything other than household expenses, and you're going to give me some time to decide how I want to handle this situation. And if I don't? I smiled at her. the same smile I used to give enemy combatants right before I pulled the trigger. Then we do this the hard way. And trust me, sweetheart, you don't want to do this the hard way. I left her sitting at the table with the evidence of her betrayal spread out in front of her and walked out of the house. As I got in my truck, I could see her through the window, frantically dialing her phone, probably calling Brooks to warn him about internal affairs. Which was perfect, because panic makes people stupid, and I needed them both to be very, very stupid for the next phase of my plan. My phone rang as I drove away. Sam Martinez. How'd dinner go? Target is rattled and making contact with co-conspirator. Phase 3 is a go. Roger that. I'll have the surveillance equipment ready. This is going to be fun. Fun wasn't the word I would have used, but it was definitely going to be satisfying. The next morning, I was parked across from the police station at 7 a.m., watching Detective Brooks pace back and forth in front of the building like a man facing a firing squad. Internal Affairs had called him in for an 8 o'clock meeting, and judging by his body language, he knew exactly what it was about. Sam was in the passenger seat, monitoring radio traffic and recording everything through a telephoto lens that could count the sweat beads on Brooks's forehead from 3 blocks away. He's been out there for 20 minutes, Sam observed. Either he's early for his meeting or he's trying to work up the courage to run. He won't run. He's got too much invested here. Wife, kids, pension. He'll try to tough it out. What about your wife? I checked my phone. No messages from Iris, which meant she was probably still in bed, trying to pretend yesterday's conversation had been a nightmare. She's in denial. Thinks she can still salvage this if she plays her cards right. And can she? I looked at Sam, and he saw something in my expression that made him lean back in his seat. Brother, she burned those cards the day she decided to sleep with another man in our bed. Now we're playing by my rules. At exactly 8 o'clock, Brooks squared his shoulders and walked into the police station. Sam and I settled in to wait. Internal affairs meetings could take anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours, depending on how cooperative the subject was and how much evidence they had to review. While we waited, I called Major Stanton. How's the operation proceeding? On schedule. Target 1 is meeting with Internal Affairs this morning. Target 2 received preliminary documentation last night and is currently in the panic phase. Any complications? None so far. Both targets are reacting predictably. Panic, poor decision-making, increased communication between co-conspirators. What's your next move? I watched the police station entrance, thinking about the conversation I'd had with Iris the night before, and the look on her face when she realized how much evidence I had. Isolation. I'm going to separate them, cut off their support networks, and force them to make increasingly desperate choices until they destroy themselves. Sounds like a solid strategy. What do you need from me? Legal consultation. I want to make sure everything I'm doing stays within the bounds of the law. I'm not interested in winning if it means going to prison. Understood. Send me your documentation and I'll review it for any potential legal issues. After I hung up, Sam nudged me and pointed toward the police station. Movement! Brooks was coming out of the building, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. His shoulders were slumped, his face was pale, and he was moving like a man who'd just received very bad news. He got in his car and sat there for several minutes, probably trying to decide what to do next. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. $20 says he's calling your wife, Sam said. No bet. Question is, what's he going to tell her? We followed Brooks at a distance as he drove through the city, eventually stopping at a small park near the river. He got out of his car and walked to a bench overlooking the water, still talking on his phone. Sam adjusted his equipment to pick up audio, but we were too far away to hear the conversation clearly. We could see Brooks's body language, though, and it told us everything we needed to know. Animated gestures, frequent hand running through his hair, the kind of agitated pacing that indicated serious stress. He's scared, Sam observed. Good. Scared people make mistakes. After about 20 minutes, Brooks ended his call and drove away. We let him go and headed back toward my house to see what Iris was up to. She wasn't home. Her car was gone, and the house was empty. But she'd left signs of hasty packing, drawers pulled out, closet doors open, bathroom items missing. "She's running," Sam said. "No, she's regrouping, probably going to stay with a friend while she figures out her next move." I checked our joint bank accounts on my phone. No unusual activity, which meant she hadn't tried to withdraw large amounts of cash. Yet. What now? Now we wait. They're going to meet somewhere to discuss strategy. When they do, we'll be ready. That afternoon, my patience was rewarded. Iris's phone, which I'd cloned the night before using some of Sam's equipment, showed a text message from Brooks. "Meet me at the usual place. 7 p.m. We need to talk." The usual place turned out to be a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of establishment that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask too many questions. Sam and I arrived early and set up surveillance from the parking lot of a fast food restaurant across the street. Brooks arrived first, looking around nervously before going into room 237. Iris showed up 20 minutes later, driving a car I didn't recognize, probably borrowed from whatever friend she was staying with. "You getting this?" I asked Sam. "Every second. Audio, video, the works. Whatever they're planning, we'll know about it." Through our equipment, we could hear fragments of their conversation. Brooks was angry, blaming Iris for the internal affairs investigation. Iris was defensive, insisting that she'd been careful. Both of them were scared and looking for someone to blame. "This is your fault," Brooks was saying. "You said your husband was clueless. You said he'd never find out." How was I supposed to know he'd go through our credit card statements? He never cared about finances before. Well, he cares now. Internal Affairs has everything. Photos, financial records, witness statements. I'm messed up. What about us? What about our plans? What plans? I can't leave my wife now. If I file for divorce while I'm under investigation, it'll look like I'm abandoning my family for my mistress. I'll lose everything. There was a long silence, then the sound of Iris crying. "So that's it? You're just going to abandon me?" "I'm not abandoning you. I'm being realistic. We need to lay low for a while, let this blow over." "And what am I supposed to do? Cole knows everything. He's going to take me for everything I have." "Maybe you should have thought of that before you married a soldier." That was apparently the wrong thing to say, because the next sound we heard was Iris slapping him, followed by a lot of shouting and cursing. The argument continued for another hour, getting progressively more heated and desperate. By the time they left, separately and clearly not on good terms, they'd managed to destroy whatever relationship they'd had and blame each other for the mess they were in. "Phase 4 complete," Sam said as we watched Brooks drive away, leaving Iris sitting alone in the motel parking lot, crying in her borrowed car. "What's Phase 5? I thought about my wife, sitting alone in that parking lot, finally understanding that her fairy tale romance with Detective Brooks was over and that she was going to face the consequences of her choices alone. Phase 5 is where we give them exactly what they deserve." 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, reviewing the final divorce papers. The meeting had taken less than an hour, which was remarkable considering how complicated adultery cases usually were. "Your wife's attorney advised her to accept the settlement," my lawyer explained. "Given the evidence you provided, she really didn't have much choice." The evidence had been comprehensive. Financial records showing Iris's use of marital assets to conduct her affair, photos and video of her meetings with Brooks, documentation of her plans to leave me and take half of everything, text messages detailing their relationship and their schemes. But the real nail in the coffin had been the revelation that Iris had been embezzling money from her law firm to help pay for her affair. Small amounts at first, just a few $100s here and there from client accounts. But over the course of several months, it had added up to nearly $10,000. I hadn't discovered that particular crime. Sam had, during one of his deep dives into Iris's financial activities. We'd turned that evidence over to her employers, who had fired her immediately and were considering pressing criminal charges. "What about Detective Brooks?" I asked. "Internal Affairs completed their investigation. He's been suspended without pay pending a full disciplinary hearing. Word is, he'll probably be forced to resign." That wasn't the end of Brooks's problems, either. His wife had filed for divorce after learning about his affair, and she was seeking full custody of their children, plus alimony. His brother-in-law had fired him from his security job after learning about the Internal Affairs investigation. And there were rumors that the FBI was looking into some of his arrest records, investigating whether he'd been trading favorable treatment for favors from female suspects. And Mrs. Harrington's current situation? I almost smiled at the formal way my lawyer referred to my soon-to-be ex-wife. She's living with her sister in New Hampshire, working at a grocery store and trying to avoid criminal charges for the embezzlement. It had taken exactly 3 weeks to destroy both of their lives completely. 3 weeks to reduce a corrupt cop and an adulterous wife to unemployed, disgraced pariahs with no money, no prospects, and no one to blame but themselves. The beauty of it was that I hadn't done anything illegal. I'd simply documented their crimes and made sure the right people saw the evidence. Everything that had happened to them was a direct result of their own choices and actions. "There is one more thing," my lawyer said, sliding another document across the desk. "Your wife wanted me to give you this." It was a handwritten letter, 2 pages of Iris's careful script. I read it while my lawyer organized the other paperwork. "Cole, I know you'll probably never forgive me, and I don't blame you. What I did was wrong, and I'm sorry. Not just sorry that I got caught, but truly sorry for hurting you. I know it doesn't matter now, but I want you to know that it wasn't about you. You were a good husband, and you didn't deserve what I did to you. I was selfish and stupid, and I convinced myself that I deserved to be happy even if it meant destroying our marriage. Kellan told me that you planned all of this, that you knew about us from the beginning and set us up. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, I understand why you did it. We hurt you, and you hurt us back. I guess that makes us even. I hope someday you can find someone who deserves you, someone who won't throw away what you're offering for a cheap thrill with a married cop. I'm sorry, Cole, for all of it." Iris, I folded the letter and put it in my jacket pocket. It was a nice apology, and it might even have been sincere, but it was about 6 months too late to matter. "Everything looks to be in order," my lawyer said. "The divorce will be final in 30 days. I signed the papers, shook his hand, and walked out into the Boston afternoon. It was a beautiful day, crisp and clear, with the kind of autumn light that made everything look sharp and clean. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. "Celebration drinks at Murphy's? I'm buying." I was about to reply when another message came in, this one from Major Stanton. "Operation complete. Well done, soldier." I stood on the courthouse steps, looking out at the city where I'd lived for the past 5 years, and realized that I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of betrayal, anger, and the need for revenge had lifted from my shoulders, leaving behind something I hadn't expected: peace. Iris had wanted space. Well, now she had all the space she could handle. She was 3 states away, working a minimum wage job and facing possible criminal charges. Brooks was unemployed, divorced, and under federal investigation. Their fairy tale romance had turned into a nightmare of their own making. And me? I was free. Free from a marriage that had been a lie. Free from a wife who had betrayed me. Free from the anger that had been consuming me for weeks. I walked down the courthouse steps and headed toward Murphy's pub, where Sam would be waiting with a beer and probably a dozen stories about the surveillance operation we'd just completed. Tomorrow I'd start thinking about what came next. Maybe I'd stay in Boston, maybe I'd move somewhere new, maybe I'd get out of the Army Reserve, maybe I'd go back to active duty. But tonight, I was going to have a drink with my friend and celebrate the successful completion of the most important mission of my life. As I walked through the city streets, I thought about the letter in my pocket and Iris's claim that we were even now. She was wrong about that. We weren't even. Justice wasn't about evening the score. It was about consequences. She and Brooks had made choices, and now they were living with the results of those choices. I hadn't destroyed their lives. They had destroyed their own lives. I had simply made sure that their crimes didn't go unpunished and their betrayal didn't go unanswered. In the Army, we have a saying, leave no one behind. But there's another saying that's just as important. Actions have consequences. Iris and Detective Brooks had learned that lesson the hard way. They had wanted space, and I had given them exactly what they asked for. Space from their jobs, space from their families, space from their comfortable lives, and most importantly, space from each other. Mission accomplished. Space denied.